AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé plan our family reunion after he insulted my parenting. I, 35F, have always been close to my family, especially my younger sister, Hannah, 32F. We grew up in a small town, and every year our extended family gathers for a reunion at our parents' place. It's a big deal for us, filled with potlucks, games, and a lot of family drama, but I love it. I have two kids, Emma, 8, and Max, 6, and every year they look forward to seeing their cousins, aunts, uncles, and grandparents. This year, Hannah announced that she and her fiancé, Luke, 34M, wanted to help plan the reunion. I was okay with that at first because they're usually organized and helpful. However, things quickly turned sour. Luke started by suggesting we scrap some of our traditional activities, like the scavenger hunt and family talent show, because he thought they were outdated and boring. That annoyed me, but I tried to let it slide. The breaking point came during a discussion about the kids. Luke made a comment about how my parenting style was too soft and that my kids need more discipline or they'll turn into brats. I was shocked. I tried to explain that Emma and Max do very well in school, are polite, and I handle discipline in a way that works for our family. Luke interrupted, saying that I was spoiling them and that my parents were enabling me. Hannah laughed nervously, but I could tell she was uncomfortable with the way he was talking. I told him that I didn't appreciate him criticizing my parenting, especially in front of the family, and that I would prefer he not comment on my kids at all. Luke rolled his eyes and muttered something about me being too sensitive. That's when I decided I didn't want him planning any part of the reunion. I told Hannah that while I loved her and trusted her judgment, I could not allow Luke to take the lead after he had insulted me and my parenting. Hannah was upset. She said I was overreacting and that Luke was just trying to help make the reunion better. I reminded her that better doesn't mean disregarding traditions or insulting family members. She got defensive and said that maybe I was being territorial and that she should be able to involve her fiancé in family events. I understood her point, but I didn't want someone who clearly didn't respect my children or my way of raising them in charge of organizing an event that includes my family, my home, and my kids. Luke, upon hearing that I didn't want him planning, got more aggressive. He accused me of being controlling and said I was ruining the family dynamic. He told Hannah that she should stand up to me and that our parents would agree he had valid points. I called my parents, who sided with me, saying that while they appreciated Luke wanting to contribute, they didn't feel he should lead the reunion. They agreed that criticizing the way I raised my kids was unacceptable. Hannah confronted me later, angry and frustrated. She accused me of being ruthless and unreasonable, saying that she couldn't believe I was shutting her fiancé out over something that could be smoothed over. I told her I wasn't shutting him out entirely. She and Luke could help with small tasks, but the planning and organization would remain with me and our parents. She stormed off and has barely spoken to me since. Now, Luke is posting on social media, saying that I'm family toxic and won't let anyone else have a say, which has caused tension among some distant relatives who see the posts. My parents and I have tried to explain our side, but Hannah seems to be siding more with Luke than with me, which breaks my heart because I've always been close to her. I feel like I'm being fair. I'm not banning Luke from attending the reunion. I'm just not letting him take over the planning, especially after the way he insulted me and my children. I've tried to compromise, but every time I make a suggestion, Luke criticizes it. It's exhausting and hurtful. I also feel guilty that my attempt to protect my kids' environment is being interpreted as controlling or selfish. Some family members have privately told me they think I'm overreacting and that I should let the new generation in, but I can't get past the fact that someone who openly criticized my kids is being allowed to lead a family event centered around them. I also worry about the tension it's causing between Hannah and me. I don't want our relationship to suffer permanently, but I also cannot let my children's well-being be compromised for the sake of avoiding conflict. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé plan the family reunion after he insulted my parenting. I feel like I'm standing up for my kids and my family traditions, but I can't help but feel like I might be making things worse with Hannah. I want the reunion to be enjoyable and harmonious, but now there's this huge rift, and I don't know how to mend it without compromising my principles. I've considered sitting down with Hannah and Luke to have a mediated conversation, but I fear it will just escalate if Luke gets defensive again. I also wonder if I should just let Luke do it to avoid the tension, even if I strongly disagree with his approach, but the thought of him criticizing my children during the planning process makes me anxious. I've been reflecting on whether I'm being too rigid or if I'm justified in setting these boundaries. I value my family and our traditions, and I want my kids to enjoy the reunion without being judged or criticized. But I also don't want to permanently damage my relationship with my sister. I feel torn because I want peace, but not at the expense of respect for myself and my children. I've tried explaining my concerns calmly, offered compromises, and asked for support from my parents, but Hannah seems to interpret it as me being controlling rather than protective. Meanwhile, Luke's social media posts are creating side tension among other relatives who aren't directly involved. I don't want to alienate anyone, but I also cannot ignore the disrespect shown to me and my kids. I feel like if I let him lead, it will set a precedent that it's acceptable to insult family members and override traditions. My hope is that by standing firm, the reunion can still happen in a way that honors our family while setting healthy boundaries. But the fallout with Hannah is painful, and I keep questioning if I could have handled it differently. So, AITA? If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious. When do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé stay in my house during a family crisis. I, 32F, have always considered myself a very accommodating and understanding person, especially when it comes to family. My parents live about 2 hours away, and my younger sister, Lily, 28F, has been engaged to her fiancé, Mark, 30M, for almost a year now. Mark and I have never really gotten along. He's polite enough, but he has a tendency to be overbearing, condescending, and seems to enjoy testing boundaries. While I usually keep the peace for the sake of my sister, I've always been wary of how much influence he has over her decisions. About 2 weeks ago, my mother fell and broke her hip. She had to undergo surgery immediately, and my father was completely overwhelmed managing the household, my mom's recovery, and coordinating her rehabilitation. Naturally, the entire family mobilized to help. My sister offered to stay with my parents to assist, but because she couldn't get time off from work immediately, she asked if I could temporarily host her and Mark at my house until she could manage her schedule better. I agreed because, honestly, I felt it was the right thing to do, and I didn't want my parents dealing with the added stress of arranging accommodations for them. The first day was fine, mostly uneventful. Mark was polite, if a little smug, but I kept interactions cordial. The second day, however, things started to unravel. My house has an open-plan living room and kitchen, and Mark immediately started rearranging furniture and moving items for convenience without asking. When I confronted him, he said, "I'm just making things easier for everyone. You shouldn't be so rigid." I reminded him this was my house, and I appreciated their presence, but I prefer to keep my space the way I had it arranged. He brushed it off, saying he didn't want to make my sister uncomfortable. I felt frustrated, but tried to let it go to avoid conflict. The following morning, I woke up to find that Mark had gone through my pantry and my fridge, throwing out items he deemed expired or unhealthy. He also left a long note criticizing my eating habits and saying that he had organized the kitchen for optimal health. I was livid. This was not just a minor inconvenience. It was a complete violation of my personal space and autonomy. I confronted him, telling him he had no right to go through my things or dictate how I live in my own home. My sister intervened and said I was overreacting and that I should just be grateful that they were helping my parents. Mark then gave me a condescending lecture about how family means compromise, and I was being selfish by prioritizing a few boxes of food over people's well-being. Things escalated further when Mark insisted on installing a new coffee machine in my kitchen because the one I had was inadequate. I refused and suggested he use the one he brought with him. He argued that it was a minor change that would benefit everyone, and that I was being unreasonable and controlling. By this point, I felt my patience wearing thin. I realized that this wasn't just a one-time overstep. Mark was actively undermining my boundaries and trying to take control of my home while using my sister's crisis as leverage. I decided to have a serious conversation with both of them. I told them that I could not host them anymore. I explained that my house is my personal space, and I cannot allow anyone to dictate how I live or manage it. I also emphasized that this decision had nothing to do with my sister's need to help our parents. She was free to visit and help, but staying here with Mark was creating an intolerable situation. My sister immediately got defensive, insisting that I was being dramatic and heartless. She accused me of picking fights for no reason, and said Mark was just trying to help. Mark, unsurprisingly, doubled down, saying I was selfish and that I should consider the bigger picture. The conversation ended with them packing their things and leaving the next morning, but the tension in the family has been palpable since. Now, my sister has stopped talking to me entirely. She has been texting me occasionally, mostly guilt-tripping messages about how I put Mark before family and questioning my loyalty. Our parents are caught in the middle. They understand my side, but they are hurt that family harmony has been shattered during a crisis. Extended family members who have learned about the situation are taking sides, and I've received mixed messages ranging from praise for standing up for myself to criticism for being cold and ungrateful. I feel conflicted. On one hand, I know that hosting them would have been stressful and invasive, and I should not have to compromise my personal boundaries, especially in my own home. On the other hand, I can't help but feel guilty about potentially making a difficult situation worse for my sister and my parents, who are already under immense strain. I also worry that this conflict might permanently damage my relationship with my sister. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé stay in my house during this family crisis, even though I initially agreed to host them and it has caused tension with my sister and parents. AITA for refusing to lend my car to my brother after he caused a serious accident last year. Last year, my younger brother, Alex, got into a really bad car accident. He was driving my dad's old sedan without a license and hit another car at an intersection. Thankfully, no one was seriously injured, but the car was totaled, and he ended up with a minor concussion and a huge fine. My parents were furious, and I was disappointed too, but I didn't cut him off completely because I knew he was under a lot of stress and made a dumb mistake. After everything settled, my parents decided to handle the financial consequences themselves, and Alex was grounded from driving anything that wasn't strictly for work or school. Fast forward a year. I have a car that I bought last summer, a used hatchback I got with some money I saved up from working 2 jobs. It's not fancy, but it's reliable and I love it. Alex recently asked if he could borrow it to go on a short trip to visit some friends about 30 minutes away. At first, I hesitated because I remembered how reckless he was last year, but he promised to be careful, said he had a valid license now, and insisted he just needed the car for the weekend. I said no. He got really upset and started bringing up that I was being unfair, that I've borrowed his stuff before, and that I was acting like I didn't trust him. I tried to explain that it wasn't about trust, but about responsibility and the fact that I don't want to risk my car getting damaged or being involved in an accident. He said he understood, but kept giving me examples of how careful he's been lately and that last year's incident was an accident, not intentional. He even said that I was being selfish and that families should help each other out. After he left, our parents called me talk. My mom said I should reconsider because Alex really needs a car and I was being too rigid. My dad was more neutral, but mentioned that family is supposed to support each other. I explained everything to them, including how much it would hurt me financially and emotionally if something happened to my car. They didn't outright say I was wrong, but the conversation ended with a lot of tension. A few days later, Alex started posting passive-aggressive comments on social media about how some people just can't be trusted, and it was obvious he was hinting at me. Our mutual friends started asking me why I wouldn't lend him my car, which made me feel even more pressured. I stood my ground and didn't reply publicly. Then, Alex came to my place in person, angry and yelling, accusing me of holding a grudge and not being a real brother. He even threatened that he wouldn't talk to me for months if I didn't lend him the car. I refused again, explaining calmly that it wasn't personal, but that I wasn't willing to risk my only vehicle. He left without saying much, and I haven't heard from him since, which has been really awkward because we usually see each other at family gatherings. The family dynamic has changed. Every time we're together, there's tension. My parents haven't really pressured me since, but I can sense they are disappointed in me. I even overheard my mom telling a cousin that sometimes doing the right thing isn't always easy for family. I feel like I made the right choice for myself, but at the same time, it's straining my relationship with Alex, and I don't know how to fix it. I've considered offering alternatives, like helping him rent a car for the weekend or giving him a ride instead, but he keeps saying it's inconvenient. Part of me feels guilty because family is supposed to support each other, but the other part of me feels that responsibility should also be mutual and that past behavior matters. I keep replaying the accident in my head and imagining how devastated I would be if it happened with my car, and I honestly can't justify the risk. I've tried talking to friends about this, and opinions are divided. Some say I'm justified because it's my property and my decision, while others say I should make a compromise to maintain family harmony. I'm starting to question myself. Am I really being selfish, or is this just about protecting my car and my peace of mind? The worst part is that I miss having a close relationship with Alex. We used to hang out almost every week, and now I avoid family events because I feel uncomfortable around him. I don't want our relationship to be permanently damaged, but I also don't want to feel forced into doing something that makes me anxious and financially vulnerable. So, AITA for refusing to lend my car to my brother, even though it's causing tension in the family. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of her partner's behavior. I, 32F, have always had a complicated relationship with my younger sister, Emma, 29F. We were close growing up, but after high school, we drifted apart. I moved across the country for work, and she stayed near our parents. Despite the distance, we would occasionally talk and catch up during holidays or birthdays. Recently, she got engaged to a man named Jason, who I had only met a few times. From those encounters, I had a gut feeling that something about him didn't sit right with me, though I couldn't quite pinpoint why. When Emma first told me she was engaged, I congratulated her, albeit cautiously. Over the next few months, I tried to get to know Jason better. Unfortunately, every time we met, his behavior raised red flags for me. He often made snide comments disguised as jokes, especially about me being single and career-focused. At family gatherings, he would monopolize conversations and belittle other people subtly. Once, during a dinner, he joked about how women like me always end up alone in front of both our parents and cousins. I laughed it off at the time, but it really hurt. Emma, on the other hand, seemed to be completely in love and often brushed off his comments as harmless teasing. I tried talking to her about my concerns gently, but she became defensive. She said I was overreacting and that I didn't understand their dynamic. This pattern continued whenever Jason was around. He would make remarks, I would feel uncomfortable, and Emma would defend him. The tipping point came a few weeks before the wedding. My parents were hosting a rehearsal dinner at their house, and I was helping them set up. Jason arrived early, and as soon as I walked in, he started questioning me about my career choices and income, insinuating that I wasn't successful enough. I tried to deflect and keep the conversation polite, but he kept pressing. At one point, he made a comment comparing me unfavorably to another cousin, and I quietly excused myself to the kitchen to get away from him. Emma followed me, visibly upset. She told me I was being rude and that I needed to stop taking everything so personally. I explained that his behavior was disrespectful and made me uncomfortable, and that I didn't feel like attending the wedding was healthy for me emotionally. She cried and said I was being selfish, that it was her big day, and that family members are supposed to support each other, not pick fights. A few days later, Emma sent me a very emotional message, asking me to reconsider attending the wedding. She wrote that she would be heartbroken if I wasn't there, and that she wanted to feel my support as her sister. I responded honestly, telling her that I loved her, but could not in good conscience be around someone who consistently disrespects me, and that I feared my presence would only lead to tension and drama. I suggested we find another way to celebrate together, perhaps before or after the wedding, where I could be involved without feeling attacked. After I sent this, my parents called me, pleading with me to attend. They argued that I was making the situation worse, that Emma's happiness should come first, and that Jason wasn't as bad as I was making him out to be. I tried explaining that it wasn't about making him look bad, but about protecting my own mental health. They insisted that family should compromise, but I still didn't feel comfortable. On the day of the wedding, I stayed home. I sent Emma a card and a gift, and I called her briefly to wish her happiness. Later that evening, I received a flood of messages from family members expressing their disappointment and anger. Some accused me of being dramatic, selfish, and unsupportive. Others told me that my relationship with Emma would never be the same if I continued to hold grudges against Jason. Emma herself called me a few days later, crying and saying she felt abandoned. She said she couldn't believe her own sister wouldn't show up for one of the most important days of her life. I tried to console her and explain my reasons again, emphasizing that my decision wasn't about hurting her, but about not putting myself in a toxic environment. She told me that if I didn't forgive Jason and attend her next family event, she might reconsider our relationship entirely. I've been grappling with this for weeks. Part of me feels guilty because, yes, it was her wedding and I do love her. But another part of me feels justified because I genuinely do not feel safe or respected around her partner. I worry that attending would have caused arguments or escalated into something worse. I also worry about the message it would send if I attended while being visibly uncomfortable. It might seem like I condoned his behavior. Some friends have told me that I did the right thing by prioritizing my mental health, while others have said that family obligations sometimes require tolerating uncomfortable situations. I keep replaying it in my head, wondering if I overreacted or if I could have handled it differently. I also wonder if I should have tried harder to find a compromise, like attending only part of the ceremony or staying in a separate room during the reception. At this point, my relationship with Emma is strained. She says she understands my concerns in theory, but can't emotionally accept that I chose not to attend her wedding. I'm afraid that this decision has permanently altered how she sees me, and I hate that my choice to protect myself may have caused her pain. I'm honestly torn between believing I did the right thing for myself and feeling guilty for disappointing my sister on her big day. So, AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of her fiancé's behavior. Character count, 6,459. AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé participate in our family business after he insulted my late father. I run a small, family-owned bakery that's been in my family for 3 generations. My father started it, and after he passed 5 years ago, I took over. I've poured my heart and soul into keeping it alive, not just as a business, but as a family legacy. My younger sister, Emily, has always been involved in small ways, mainly helping during holidays or big orders, but she's never wanted to take a leadership role, which is fine with me. She's always had her own interests, and I respect that. About a year ago, she started dating someone named Derek. He's charming on the surface, very confident, and seems genuinely ambitious. I met him a few times before the incident I'm about to describe, and while I didn't dislike him outright, I did notice he often made condescending remarks, usually framed as jokes, about the bakery or my father's methods. Everything came to a head last month when Emily told me she and Derek wanted to get engaged. Naturally, she was excited and wanted to involve the family, which included asking if Derek could help out at the bakery. Emily said Derek wanted to learn the ropes because he's planning on investing in a small bakery of his own and thought seeing our operations could help him. At first, I thought it might be fine if he helped in a small, observational capacity, but I made it very clear that the bakery is my father's legacy and I would not tolerate disrespectful behavior. I also mentioned that he must follow my rules, respect the recipes, and treat staff professionally. The first day Derek came in, he immediately started criticizing the way I organized the kitchen. He kept saying things like, "Honestly, this seems outdated. You could be running this place so much more efficiently if you just modernized everything." I tried to explain that the bakery thrives because of the traditional methods my father taught me, but he brushed it off and said, "Well, my father built a successful restaurant chain, and trust me, you'd do better if you did things my way. I bit my tongue and tried to redirect him to other tasks, hoping he would settle down, but it only escalated. Later that day, he made a comment that made my blood run cold. We were discussing a family recipe my father had passed down, and he said, "Honestly, your dad wouldn't have lasted in today's market. He was stuck in the past, and that's why small bakeries like this eventually fail." He laughed as if it were a harmless joke. I couldn't believe he said that about my father, who had worked tirelessly to make this bakery what it is. I asked him to leave for the day, saying his behavior was inappropriate, and he stormed out, calling me overly sensitive. Emily was furious when I told her what happened. She said I overreacted and that Derek was just teasing me and that I should let him learn and give him a chance. I explained that it wasn't teasing, it was disrespectful, and it wasn't just about me. It was about my father's legacy and the staff who look up to me. She accused me of being controlling and said I was trying to ruin her engagement. We ended up arguing for hours. She said if I didn't allow Derek to help at the bakery, she wouldn't come by at all, and that she felt I was putting my personal grudges above family. I refused to let Derek back in. Since then, Emily has been distant, barely speaking to me except for necessary family communications. She's made a few pointed comments about me being stubborn and unable to adapt to modern ideas, and Derek has called me paranoid and old-fashioned. Some extended family members have taken Emily's side, saying that maybe I should give him a chance and that he wasn't trying to be mean. I've tried explaining that it's not about being modern or old-fashioned. It's about respect. I feel like I'm in an impossible position. On one hand, I don't want to damage my relationship with Emily, who has been my sister and close friend all my life. On the other hand, I feel like if I let Derek walk all over the bakery and insult my father's memory, it would be a betrayal of everything I've worked for and of my family legacy. I've even considered stepping back from the bakery temporarily just to avoid conflict, but I know that wouldn't solve the problem and would probably just embolden him. The tension is affecting my staff as well. Some have told me they feel uncomfortable around Derek, saying that he's condescending and rude. I'm worried that if I give in, it will set a precedent that disrespect is tolerated here. My sister, meanwhile, has started posting on social media about how family drama is keeping her from being close to me and how some people can't accept change. It's hard to see her like this because I've always been the one she confided in first, but I can't reconcile allowing someone who has insulted my father and disrespected our family business to be involved. I'm now being asked repeatedly by multiple family members if I can find some compromise, like Derek observing from a corner or helping in minor ways, but I feel like any level of participation gives him some form of approval or legitimacy that he doesn't deserve. I've also thought about inviting him for coffee or a meeting to discuss boundaries, but the way he's spoken about my father makes me question whether he's capable of respecting anything I say. So I'm stuck. My sister feels hurt and betrayed. Derek thinks I'm unreasonable, and some family members are pressuring me to let bygones be bygones. At the same time, I feel like I need to protect my father's legacy and my staff from someone who doesn't respect them. I keep asking myself if I'm being too rigid or if I'm justified in refusing to let him participate in the bakery in any way. Am I the asshole for refusing to let my sister's fiancé participate in the family business after he insulted my late father and disrespected our staff, even though it's straining my relationship with my sister? AITA for refusing to let my younger brother move back in after he burned bridges with the family? So, I, 34M, have a younger brother, Ben, 28M. Our parents passed away a few years ago, and since then, I've been the one keeping the family together. I live in a 3-bedroom house I inherited from them, and Ben has bounced between different cities and jobs since his mid-20s. He's always been a bit of a free spirit, but his choices lately have been causing real problems, and I don't know if I'm overreacting. Backstory: Ben has always had a strained relationship with the family. He has a tendency to be impulsive and occasionally dishonest, which caused a lot of arguments when we were younger. Since our parents died, I've tried to be the stable one, making sure he's okay financially and emotionally, but I've also made it clear that there are boundaries. I help when I can, but I also expect him to take responsibility for himself. Fast forward to last year. Ben lost his job after being caught embezzling money from a small company he worked for. I won't lie, I was furious, but I also knew that he had no savings and nowhere to go, so I reluctantly let him stay at my house temporarily while he figured things out. The first month was rough, but he seemed to be trying. He got another job, paid me some rent, and it looked like things were stabilizing. Then things took a turn for the worse. Ben started bringing home friends who were not exactly the best influence. People with criminal records, some who had drug issues, and one person who I caught stealing from my kitchen multiple times. I told him I wasn't comfortable with him having these people in the house, especially because I live alone and work from home. He agreed at first, but then kept breaking that agreement. I eventually had to confront him and ask him to make a choice. Either he followed the house rules, or he'd need to find another place to live. He got angry and stormed out, saying he would never come back to this controlling house again. I thought that was the end of it, but about 2 months ago, he showed up at my door completely unannounced. He said he'd had a rough patch with his new job, he had nowhere to stay, and he thought we could start fresh. I explained that the house is not a hotel and that he can't just show up whenever he feels like it. He got defensive and said that I was being cold and that family should stick together no matter what. I reminded him of the previous issues, the theft, the disrespect for house rules, and the way he treated me and the friends he brought in. I also reminded him of the embezzlement situation and how it affected my trust in him. He got even more upset and started accusing me of being selfish. I told him I wasn't willing to risk my safety or well-being just to provide him with a place to stay. I also mentioned that if he wanted to prove he could be responsible, he could look for his own apartment or stay with a friend temporarily. He said he didn't see why he should have to do that when it was his family. The argument ended with him leaving angrily, slamming my door, and saying he'll never speak to me again. Since then, I've had mixed feelings. Part of me feels guilty for refusing to let him back in, thinking maybe I should have been more forgiving or understanding. Another part of me feels completely justified because I have to protect my own space and sanity. My friends and coworkers are split too. Some say I should be firm with boundaries, while others say I could have been more accommodating given the circumstances. Recently, my cousin told me that Ben has been telling people I kicked him out of the family house for no reason and painting me as the villain. That really hurt because I've been nothing but supportive to him for years, even letting him stay rent-free at times, giving him financial help, and trying to guide him. I can't help but feel frustrated that he refuses to acknowledge his own actions. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother move back in after everything that happened. I feel like I've been fair and tried to support him, but he keeps crossing boundaries and disregarding the trust and rules I've set. At the same time, I hate the idea of him thinking I abandoned him when he's already been through so much. I just don't know if I'm being too harsh or if I'm doing the right thing by protecting my own life and space. I'm open to honest opinions because right now I feel torn between guilt and self-preservation, and I can't tell if I'm overreacting or if I need to stick to my boundaries firmly. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after a decade of family drama. I, 32F, have always had a complicated relationship with my family, especially my younger sister, Emma, 28F. Growing up, our household was chaotic. Our parents were constantly at odds, emotionally unavailable at times, and heavily favored certain children, depending on the situation. Emma, in particular, seemed to thrive in the chaos, often manipulating situations to her advantage. I, on the other hand, learned to tread carefully, avoid conflict, and keep my life as separate as possible from the family's drama. For years, I distanced myself from family events whenever possible. I would occasionally attend birthdays or holidays, but only under conditions I could control. My parents never outright punished me for this, but I always felt the tension when I didn't conform to expectations. Emma, however, has never let me forget my perceived failures to participate in the family's theatrics. She would text or call constantly, berating me for missing gatherings, sometimes making passive-aggressive comments about how I didn't care about family. Fast forward to the present. Emma recently got engaged to her fiancé, Mark, 30M, and has been extremely vocal about how she expects everyone to attend the wedding, no exceptions. At first, I thought I could navigate this. I explained that I had a demanding work schedule, and sometimes traveling home wasn't feasible. I even tried offering to attend virtually for certain events leading up to the wedding, like the bridal shower or rehearsal dinner. Emma dismissed these suggestions, insisting that my presence in person was non-negotiable and that missing out would be hurtful. Then came the wedding date announcement. It was in a city several states away, requiring flights, hotel bookings, and days off work. I started doing the math, and it became clear that attending the wedding would cost me a significant amount financially and would be extremely stressful logistically. I tried to bring this up to Emma, explaining that I could not commit due to financial constraints and work obligations. Instead of understanding, she accused me of being selfish and unsupportive, claiming I had been planning to skip her milestones for years. Things escalated when our mother got involved. She called me, saying, "Emma is devastated that you might not be there. You've been distant your whole life, and this is your chance to make it right." I explained again that I genuinely wanted to be there for important family moments, but couldn't justify the travel and expenses for this event. She responded, "Family comes first. You can figure it out." I ended the call frustrated and stressed, realizing that no amount of reasoning would satisfy their expectations. I finally made the decision to decline attending the wedding. I sent Emma a message, explaining my reasons carefully. I told her I loved her, wished her the best, and would celebrate in my own way from afar. I even offered to host a small dinner for her and Mark when they were back in town after the honeymoon. My message was polite but firm. The reaction was immediate and intense. Emma sent a long text accusing me of destroying our relationship and being incapable of empathy or love for family. She told me not to bother coming to future events, implying I was now persona non grata. My parents were visibly upset and said I was choosing work and money over family, framing my decision as a moral failing rather than a logistical reality. Even distant relatives reached out to ask why I wasn't attending, and I felt myself being scrutinized from all sides. In the days following, I started getting messages from friends and colleagues expressing disbelief that my family was pressuring me so intensely. Some reminded me that it was perfectly reasonable to set boundaries, especially with people who had a history of manipulation. But the guilt was heavy. I couldn't shake the thought that I was abandoning my sister on what she called the most important day of her life, even if her definition of important seemed tied more to appearances than genuine connection. Emma continued sending messages, some calm, others hostile. She wrote, "I hope you realize that some things can't be fixed by flowers or dinners afterward. You've made your choice, and you've hurt me deeply." I tried to respond rationally, explaining that my decision wasn't about hurting her, but about preserving my own mental and financial well-being. She ignored this and doubled down on guilt, claiming that I had always been the problem in our family dynamic. The tension has now spilled into my work life. A co-worker who knows Emma and our family asked why I wasn't attending and seemed shocked that I would let family down like that. I tried to explain boundaries and personal limits, but I could tell the judgment was there. I've never felt more isolated, even though I know logically that attending would have caused me extreme stress and resentment. I've considered compromising, maybe flying in for a day or sending a personal video message, but I suspect that would not satisfy Emma. She seems to want an all-or-nothing demonstration of loyalty, and I don't know if I'm willing to sacrifice my well-being to meet her expectations. I'm now questioning myself constantly. Am I really being selfish? Or is this a case of me finally enforcing reasonable boundaries after years of family pressure? Some friends think I'm justified, while others say family should take precedence, especially for something as monumental as a wedding. I feel torn between protecting my mental health and finances and maintaining some semblance of family peace. So AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after years of family drama and constant pressure, even though it has resulted in them cutting me off and labeling me as selfish. AITA for refusing to let my sister's kids live with me after a family tragedy. I, 34 am, have always had a complicated relationship with my sister, Jenna, 31F. We grew up in a pretty tight-knit family, but as adults, our lives have gone in very different directions. I live in a small city in a modest apartment, working as a software developer. I've never been married, and I don't have kids, partly because I'm not sure I want them, partly because I enjoy the freedom I have. Jenna, on the other hand, got married young, had 2 kids, Emma, 10, and Lucas, 7. And her husband, Greg, is known for being difficult and sometimes verbally abusive. A few months ago, tragedy struck. Jenna and Greg were in a car accident. Jenna survived with minor injuries, but Greg died instantly. The kids are obviously devastated. I was one of the first people she called after the hospital stabilized the situation. Her immediate reaction was to ask if the kids could come live with me permanently. She's currently staying with a friend temporarily while dealing with the legal and logistical aftermath of Greg's death, but she insists that her kids need stability and that I should be their guardian. I told her I couldn't take them in. I tried to explain that I'm not ready to be a parent, that my apartment is small and I live alone, and that I work long hours, so I wouldn't be able to provide the attention they need. I also pointed out that the kids' school, their friends, and their routines would all be disrupted if I suddenly became their full-time guardian. She got very emotional and accused me of being selfish. She keeps bringing up how much the kids need family right now, and she says I'm shirking my responsibility as their uncle. Since then, our family has become divided. Some of our relatives think I should absolutely step up and take the kids, arguing that it's family duty and that I should sacrifice my personal life for their well-being. Others are quietly supporting me, saying that taking on 2 children unexpectedly is a huge life change and that Jenna needs to accept that not everyone is in a position to do that. To complicate things further, I have been helping in other ways. I offered to pay for temporary childcare, help with school supplies, and assist with therapy sessions for the kids. I also spend weekends with them to give Jenna some respite, but she says that's not enough. She started implying that I don't really care about my niece and nephew, and has begun posting passive-aggressive comments on social media that clearly reference me without naming me. I feel guilty, but I also feel that my limits are being completely ignored. I've even looked into legal guardianship options for others, like a cousin who has a bigger house and experience with kids, but Jenna refuses to consider them, insisting it has to be me because I'm her only sibling. Last week, Jenna came over unannounced with Emma and Lucas, expecting me to care for them while she ran errands. I told her I had plans I couldn't cancel, and she stormed out with the kids, crying and accusing me of being heartless. I feel like no matter what I do, I'm being painted as the villain in this situation. Part of me wonders if I'm being selfish. I know the kids are going through the worst moment of their young lives, and I want to help. But I also know I'm not equipped to take on full-time parenting, and I worry that doing so would lead to resentment, stress, and possibly even an unhealthy environment for them. My family keeps telling me I need to think about the kids, not myself, but isn't there a way to help without completely upending my life? I have tried, but apparently nothing is enough. I've also offered to be their legal guardian only if a professional child care arrangement can be put in place that ensures their emotional needs are met, but Jenna refuses to discuss that route. So here I am, feeling like a bad person, stressed out, and uncertain. AITA for refusing to let my niece and nephew live with me permanently. After my brother-in-law's death, I want to support my sister and her children, but I also want to be honest about my own limits. Since the accident, I've been spending more time with the kids than ever before. I take them to the park, help them with schoolwork on weekends, and even take them on small-day trips. I have suggested counseling for all 3 of them and offered to cover the costs. But every time I do something reasonable, Jenna says it isn't enough. She wants me to move in full-time with the kids, give up my personal space, and handle all their day-to-day needs. I've tried to explain that while I love them, I am not capable of being their full-time caregiver. I'm still grieving too, in my own way, and I have obligations that I cannot abandon. She seems unable to see that. She has even said that my unwillingness to take them makes me less of family. The situation has started affecting my mental health. I have trouble sleeping at night, worrying about how to navigate family dynamics while supporting the kids. I feel torn between my desire to help and my personal boundaries. My parents are aware of the situation, and they have started pressuring me as well. They say I'm the only responsible adult who can care for the kids, even though I disagree. There's also the fact that Jenna is still processing her own grief. I understand that, but I cannot let that guilt manipulate me into a situation I am not prepared for. The kids are wonderful, and I love spending time with them, but full-time guardianship is not something I can realistically commit to. Sometimes I worry that family expectations are unreasonable. I have tried every possible compromise: weekend visits, paying for childcare, being available for emergencies, helping with therapy, attending parent-teacher meetings, and even offering to stay temporarily if other support structures were in place. But Jenna dismisses all of these offers. She insists on full-time care and views any refusal as a moral failure. I feel like the line between helping and enabling is being blurred, and I want to respect my own limits while still being a supportive uncle. I have suggested she consider other relatives or professional guardianship services, but she refuses. This has caused tension with my parents, who have started saying things like, "You don't know how lucky you are to have them in your life, and family comes first." So, AITA for refusing to let my sister's kids live with me permanently, even after her husband's death. I'm struggling to balance compassion with personal boundaries, and I feel like I'm being unfairly vilified for trying to be honest about what I can handle. My heart is with the kids, but my life is not built to accommodate full-time parenting, and I'm afraid the stress would do more harm than good, for me and potentially for them. I don't want to be the villain in this story, but I also don't want to lose myself in the process of trying to help. What I'm asking is it truly selfish to acknowledge that I can't provide full-time care? Or am I failing my family in a situation that demands sacrifice? Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to let my sister live with me after she lost her job. Even though our parents think I'm being unreasonable, I, 29F, have always been independent. I live in a small but comfortable 2-bedroom apartment in a mid-sized city, and I work in marketing. My younger sister, Emma, 26F, has always struggled to maintain steady employment. She's smart and capable, but she has a history of jumping from job to job and rarely has had financial stability. Our parents are supportive of her in ways I sometimes find frustrating. They have this pattern of bailing her out whenever she hits a rough patch, which has created tension between Emma and me over the years. A few weeks ago, Emma called me in a panic. She had just been let go from her 3rd job this year. She had also racked up some bills, and her savings were almost non-existent. She asked if she could move in with me temporarily until she got back on her feet. My initial instinct was to say yes, because she's my sister, but the more I thought about it, the more I hesitated. I know Emma can be difficult to live with. She has a habit of leaving dishes in the sink for days, never doing laundry on time, and borrowing money without paying it back. When I told her I was hesitant, she got upset. She said I was being cruel and unsupportive. She even said I loved our parents more than her because they would never deny her help. I explained that it wasn't about loving them more. It was about boundaries and my own mental health. I told her that I could help her in other ways. I could help her draft resumes, practice interviews, or even give her some financial advice. But living together was a different story. I already live a busy life with 2 roommates who I share the apartment with, and adding Emma into the mix would be overwhelming. Emma refused to listen to that reasoning. She started saying things like, "You're my sister. Family is supposed to help each other, and if you really cared, you'd let me stay at least until I get a job." I reminded her that helping doesn't always mean providing a home, and that I was more than willing to help in ways that wouldn't compromise my own living situation. This led to a long, tense conversation where she eventually accused me of being selfish and cold-hearted. After that, our parents got involved. They called me multiple times, insisting that I give Emma a chance and be a good sister. They argued that I had the space and that I should be the one to help because they couldn't accommodate her right now. I tried explaining my perspective calmly, emphasizing that enabling her behavior hadn't been helpful in the past and that I wanted her to take responsibility for her own life. They didn't accept this explanation and have since been passive-aggressively hinting that I'm failing as a sibling and that Emma might never forgive me. In the meantime, Emma has been staying with a friend, but I can tell she's bitter about my refusal. She's been posting passive-aggressive messages on social media about family, responsibility, and selfish siblings, which has made me even more stressed. I've tried reaching out to her to show support in other ways, sending her meal kits, helping her prepare for interviews, and even lending small amounts of money, but she barely acknowledges it. My roommates also find the situation stressful because our parents and Emma keep calling and texting about my refusal to help. I've had to set strict boundaries and even block some numbers temporarily just to keep my home peaceful. I feel like no matter what I do, I'm being cast as the villain. I want to support my sister, but I can't do it at the cost of my own mental health, personal boundaries, and household harmony. I've also reflected on whether I'm being too rigid. On one hand, I do feel guilty because Emma is genuinely in a tough spot. On the other hand, I remember past experiences where helping her in ways I wasn't comfortable with only led to resentment or her repeating the same mistakes. I suggested she look into short-term rental options, employment programs, and other resources in our city, but she seems unwilling to consider anything outside of living with me. To complicate things, our parents have made it clear that they think my refusal is a moral failing. They keep comparing me to friends, siblings who always help each other, and implying that my independence is selfishness. This makes me feel like I'm being punished for having boundaries, which I find exhausting and unfair. So, AITA here, I'm trying to balance supporting my sister with maintaining my own life, but the constant pressure from both her and our parents is wearing me down. I don't want to damage our relationship permanently, but I also can't let her move in. I've been patient, I've offered other types of support, and I've been clear about my reasons, yet it feels like nothing I do is enough. Has anyone else dealt with a sibling in a similar position? I want to help her succeed, but I also want to stay sane and keep my household stable. I would like to understand if my refusal truly makes me the asshole, or if it's reasonable to set these boundaries, even when family pressure is intense. So, Reddit AITA? AITA for refusing to let my brother move back in after he lost his job? A few months ago, my brother, Jason, lost his job unexpectedly. He's 32, single, and has always bounced between short-term jobs, never really sticking to one for more than a year or two. I've always been the more financially stable sibling. I have a steady job in IT, a small house in the suburbs, and some savings. When Jason called me in a panic, saying he couldn't pay his rent and asking if he could move back in with me temporarily, I hesitated but didn't outright say no. I explained that my house is small, and while I could help him financially, having him live with me could be complicated. Jason begged and promised it would only be for a month or two until he got back on his feet. He painted a picture of how grateful he would be and how he would make it easy on me. I reluctantly agreed under one condition. He would have to contribute to household chores and rent in whatever way he could, even if small, because I couldn't afford to completely shoulder his living costs indefinitely. I also made it clear that my tolerance for slacking or freeloading would be zero. He moved in a week later. The first few days were fine. He helped with dishes occasionally, mowed the lawn, and seemed eager to settle back in. But after the first week, the problem started. Jason didn't have a regular schedule, so he would sleep late, wake up late, and spend most of the day playing video games or binge-watching shows. He wasn't paying any rent, and even though I was understanding initially, his lack of effort started to frustrate me. I brought it up gently a few times, asking him to at least contribute a few $100s to help with groceries and utilities, but he kept saying, "I'll get a job soon, I promise." 2 months passed, and he still hadn't made any progress. He applied to a few jobs, but never followed up, and when I suggested he consider something less ideal just to get money coming in, he got defensive. Around this time, I also noticed that he was eating my food without asking, leaving dirty laundry in my bedroom, and borrowing my things without returning them. I asked him to be more mindful, and he apologized, but nothing really changed. I started feeling like my kindness was being taken for granted. One evening, my patience finally broke. He had borrowed my laptop for a job application, but was actually streaming movies, and I found him asleep on the couch with crumbs everywhere and my coffee cup still in the armrest. I told him I couldn't continue this arrangement. I explained that I was happy to help him get back on his feet, but living in my house with no effort on his part was unacceptable. I offered to help him financially for a short period if he needed it for rent elsewhere, but he couldn't stay indefinitely. Jason exploded. He accused me of being heartless and claimed I was supposed to be family and support him no matter what. He reminded me of all the times I had asked him for help in the past and how I owed him. I tried to calmly explain that helping someone doesn't mean letting them take advantage of your generosity, but he wasn't having it. He started posting on social media about how I was kicking out my own brother in his time of need and asking friends and family to weigh in. Some relatives sided with him, saying I should be more understanding, while others agreed that he was being lazy and entitled. A week later, Jason moved out after a lot of arguing. He found a temporary room in a shared apartment, and I tried to keep contact minimal to avoid more drama. However, now that he's settled in elsewhere, he keeps sending me long messages about how I ruined our relationship and how I should feel guilty for not helping him more. He also brings it up when we see family, making me the villain in everyone's eyes. I feel frustrated because I genuinely try to help, but I also have limits and need to maintain my own boundaries. I've always been supportive in ways that don't compromise my own well-being, and it seems like no one can see that side of the story. I want to maintain a relationship with my brother, but I also don't want to allow myself to be exploited. Some friends have told me I was right to set boundaries, but others insist that family should always come first. I'm starting to wonder if I was too harsh or if I should have found a way to let him stay longer despite the behavior. I just don't see how that would have been fair or sustainable. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother live with me indefinitely after he lost his job, even though he begged for help. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after a decade-long family dispute. I, 34 am, have had a complicated relationship with my family for as long as I can remember. I grew up in a relatively small town with my parents, my older sister Emma, 38F, and my younger brother Liam, 31M. My sister and I were always close in childhood, but everything changed when I was about 24. At that time, I had just graduated college and was trying to figure out my career path. I was working a low-paying job and living in a tiny apartment while trying to build a life for myself. Emma, who had been working in a stable corporate position since her early 20s, was getting married and had a very clear vision for her wedding. The trouble started when Emma insisted that I contribute financially to her wedding in a significant way. She didn't just want me to buy a gift or chip in for a group present. She wanted me to cover a substantial portion of the catering and decorations. At the time, I simply could not afford it. I tried to explain my situation, but she wouldn't listen. She said it wasn't about the money, it was about family support and pride. I felt trapped and guilty, but I honestly didn't have the funds. We argued repeatedly, and our parents backed her on this. They told me I was being selfish and unsupportive of my sister's big day. The tension escalated to the point where I considered not attending at all, but ultimately I went to the wedding. I stayed quiet during the event, barely interacting with anyone, and it was extremely uncomfortable. After the wedding, things didn't improve. I felt that my parents and sister had turned their backs on me, and the resentment lingered. I tried to rebuild the relationship, but every time I brought up my feelings, I was dismissed or accused of overreacting. Over the years, we had intermittent contact, holiday messages, occasional phone calls, but it never felt genuine. My parents never apologized for pressuring me, and Emma never acknowledged that her expectations had been unrealistic. Fast forward to now. Emma is getting married again, this time to someone else. She's very public about the wedding plans on social media, and it's clearly going to be an expensive, elaborate event. Recently, she sent me a formal invitation and followed it with multiple texts asking if I would RSVP. She also mentioned that she was expecting me to help out financially this time as well, though she phrased it more subtly, implying that my attendance was contingent on contributing. I felt my stomach drop. I told her honestly that I would not be attending. I explained that the way she treated me during her first wedding left me feeling hurt and unsupported, and that I could not in good conscience be part of an event where I knew I would be seen as a guest who pays rather than a brother. I also made it clear that my absence was not because I don't love her, but because I need to protect my mental health and financial stability. The response was explosive. Emma accused me of being immature and petty, saying I was holding a decade-old grudge and that I was embarrassing the family. She also told my parents, who were furious. My parents called me repeatedly, demanding that I reconsider, insisting that I was making a huge mistake and that I would regret not being there for my sister. They said I was choosing pride over family, and that my relationship with Emma would be permanently damaged. I've received messages from other family members and mutual friends, mostly saying things like, "It's just a wedding. Why are you making it so complicated?" And "You're overreacting. Can't you just attend and ignore the money issue?" Some friends suggest that I'm being overly dramatic and that family is worth compromising for, but I can't shake the feeling that attending would send the wrong message, that my boundaries and feelings don't matter. Since my refusal, my parents have stopped talking to me as frequently. Emma has unfollowed me on social media, and there's a lot of tension at family gatherings. Part of me feels guilty because I know weddings are important moments, and it hurts to be excluded. Another part of me feels justified because attending under the same conditions would feel like reliving a decade-old trauma and betraying my own values. I've considered trying to reconcile in a different way, maybe sending a thoughtful gift or arranging a private visit, but I'm worried that anything I do will be interpreted as weakness or admission of guilt. I want to maintain some kind of relationship with my sister, but I also feel that attending the wedding would compromise my self-respect. So, AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after a long-standing family dispute, knowing that it will likely further strain relationships with both her and my parents. AITA for refusing to lend my car to my sister after she caused a huge fight during my family vacation. Last summer, my family decided to go on a week-long vacation to a lakeside cabin that my parents have owned for decades. I'm 28, single, and have been the responsible one in my family for as long as I can remember. I work as a graphic designer and drive a 2020 Honda Civic that I bought entirely with my own savings. I've always been very careful about lending it out because it's both new and reliable, and I don't like people who aren't cautious with cars. My sister, Amy, is 25 and married with a 3-year-old. She's a great mom, but she's notoriously reckless with other people's property. She has a history of getting dents and scratches on borrowed cars, losing keys, and sometimes even running into minor accidents. My parents have warned me countless times to not let her drive my car, but I always wanted to maintain a good relationship, so I try to let things slide with smaller stuff. The vacation started out fine. We all arrived on Saturday and spent the first day settling in and unpacking. On Sunday morning, my sister asked if she could borrow my car to go to the grocery store because she didn't want to wake up her husband and their child. I told her I was uncomfortable letting her drive it, given past experiences. She immediately started whining, saying that I was so controlling and that I never let anyone use my things. She claimed that if I trusted her, I'd let her drive. I tried to calmly explain that it wasn't about trust. It was about my comfort level and the fact that I work hard to buy the car. She said she would take extra care, that she would only go 5 minutes down the road, and that she really needed it. I still said no. She huffed and stomped off. Later that morning, my parents asked what happened, and I told them. They looked a little disappointed in me, saying that I could have just let her use it and set boundaries later. I felt frustrated because I didn't think a temporary convenience was worth the stress of worrying about damage to my car. Things escalated on Monday. My sister decided she wanted to take a day trip to a nearby town, about an hour away, to go shopping. She again asked for the car. This time, she brought her husband into the discussion, saying, "We're just going to drive there and back. It's literally no big deal. Why are you making this into a huge fight?" I repeated my reasoning. I don't feel comfortable lending it out. She accused me of being selfish and said I was ruining the vacation for everyone. This triggered a massive argument. My sister started yelling that I'm always so obsessed with control and money, and that I never consider anyone else's feelings. My parents tried to mediate, but ended up taking her side, saying I should loosen up and that it's my car, but it's still part of a family trip, so I should be willing to share. My husband wasn't there, but hypothetically, he probably would have agreed with me because he knows how careful I am with my things. I stayed firm and refused. Amy stomped off again, giving me the silent treatment. The rest of the day was tense. She barely spoke to me except to make passive-aggressive comments about my selfishness and control issues. Her husband tried to defend me later, saying he understood why I wouldn't lend the car, but that it was hard to calm her down once she decided I was the villain. By Wednesday, the tension had infected the entire vacation. My parents, seeing the conflict, started encouraging me to just let her use the car so we could all be happy, but I felt that giving in would only reinforce the idea that my boundaries don't matter. During breakfast, Amy loudly announced she would figure out another way to get around, making a point of glaring at me. On Thursday, the final straw happened. I went for a walk around the lake to cool off, and when I returned, Amy had borrowed my dad's old pickup truck instead, which was barely functional and extremely uncomfortable. She drove it recklessly, ignored basic safety rules, and almost hit a deer on the road back to the cabin. Everyone freaked out, including me, and my dad yelled at her for being careless. I realized that by letting her drive anything without supervision, someone could get seriously hurt. That night, I told my parents firmly that I would not lend her my car under any circumstances and that my boundaries are not up for debate. The vacation ended with icy relations. Amy barely spoke to me the rest of the week, and my parent avoided taking sides directly but looked disappointed in me for not being more accommodating. When we got home, Amy sent a long text saying I'm controlling, selfish, and ruin family fun, and that she doesn't understand why I can't just trust her for 5 minutes. I replied politely but firmly that my boundaries are important and that trust doesn't obligate me to ignore my comfort and safety concerns. A few months later, my parents brought it up again, saying they think I overreacted. Amy still seems cold toward me, and I sometimes wonder if I should have just let her borrow the car to keep the peace. On the other hand, I really value my possessions, and lending out my car to someone with a history of recklessness feels irresponsible. I also feel like my family prioritizes convenience over respecting boundaries. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister borrow my car during the vacation. I feel like I was being cautious and responsible, but my family makes me feel like I'm being unnecessarily rigid and selfish. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after discovering what she planned behind my back. I, 32F, have always had a complicated relationship with my sister, Jenna, 29F. Growing up, we were close, but our bond has always been fragile because of how competitive she can be. She's always been the one to get all the attention from our parents, excel academically, and seemingly charm everyone around her. I've tried to accept it, and in many ways, I genuinely admire her. But there's always been a subtle tension, especially as we got older. I try to keep things cordial and supportive, but I also made it clear I value honesty and transparency. A few months ago, Jenna got engaged to her fiancé, Mike, 31M. Initially, I was genuinely happy for her, and I offered to help with the wedding planning in any way she wanted. I wasn't overly involved at first, but I asked to be kept in the loop for family events and any decisions where my presence would matter. Jenna agreed, and everything seemed fine on the surface. Fast forward to last week, I discovered that my sister had made some choices regarding the wedding that directly involved me, without consulting me at all. At first, it seemed small, like she decided on a seating arrangement without asking me, where I'd be most comfortable or even consider my opinion. But when I dug deeper, I realized she had essentially rewritten my role in the wedding entirely. Originally, I was going to be one of her bridesmaids, which I accepted gladly. I even helped her choose dresses, offered advice on colors, and attended multiple fittings. But it turns out that she had quietly decided to replace me with her friend, Laura, because she thought Laura fit the aesthetic better and that my personality might overshadow the wedding vibe. I found out through a mutual friend who saw Laura at the bridal shop with my sister. At first, I tried to rationalize it, thinking maybe there was a miscommunication, so I confronted Jenna gently over text. Her response shocked me. She said that she didn't think it mattered to me and that she wanted the wedding to be perfect, and Laura was perfect for that role. I felt completely blindsided. Not only had she ignored my involvement and input, but she had also dismissed my feelings entirely. I was hurt, embarrassed, and honestly furious. We texted back and forth for a bit, and she kept saying things like, "It's just one day," and "I know you'll be there anyway, don't make it weird." But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about the bridesmaid role. It was a pattern. I started thinking about the other instances where she had made decisions that affected me without asking. Family trips, holiday gatherings, even some personal milestones she knew I cared about. It all suddenly felt like a clear message. My feelings, my time, and my presence didn't matter unless it served a purpose. After a lot of deliberation, I decided to have a final in-person conversation with her. I wanted to express my feelings honestly and give her a chance to explain herself. We met for coffee, and I calmly told her that I felt excluded, unappreciated, and disrespected. I explained that being a bridesmaid was important to me, not just for the role itself, but because it symbolized our relationship and mutual respect. I asked why she hadn't at least told me directly or asked my opinion before making such a significant change. Her response was unsettling. She told me that she knew I would overreact and that she didn't want to deal with my emotions ruining the mood. She added that the wedding was her day and that I needed to learn to support her choices without making it about myself. At that moment, I realized that any attempt to be involved would likely be disregarded again, and any feelings I expressed would be brushed aside. I felt manipulated, dismissed, and frankly, deeply hurt. I left that meeting and told her I needed time to process everything. After thinking it through for a couple of days, I came to the conclusion that attending the wedding would not feel celebratory for me. I would be forced to witness her deliberately sidelining me while pretending everything was fine. So, I sent her a message explaining that I could not attend the wedding. I emphasized that this was not about her happiness or the marriage itself, but about my own boundaries and emotional well-being. I told her I loved her, wished her the best, and hoped she could respect my decision, but I would not be part of the day. The response I received was explosive. She texted me calling me selfish, dramatic, and even accused me of trying to ruin her wedding. Our parents got involved, and they were divided. My mom sided with Jenna, saying I should put my feelings aside for family, while my dad tried to understand my perspective but admitted he didn't want a major family conflict during the wedding. Our extended family has been subtly shaming me, asking why I would do this to spoil her special day, and it's been emotionally exhausting. Some of my friends say I'm justified for standing up for myself, while others think I'm overreacting and that I should just go for her sake. I don't want to force myself into a situation that will make me miserable or humiliated. I also don't want to attend a wedding where my role is being intentionally minimized and my feelings disregarded. But at the same time, I can't help but worry that I'm making things worse for my relationship with my sister and my family. I feel like if I attend, I'll be resentful the entire time, and if I don't attend, I risk permanent damage to our bond. So, AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because she replaced me as a bridesmaid without telling me and dismissed my feelings when I confronted her. I feel like I've reached a point where I have to prioritize my mental health and self-respect, but the backlash has been intense, and I'm questioning whether I should just go for the family. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of her fiancé's behavior. I, 28F, have always been close with my family, especially my younger sister, Emma, 25F. Growing up, we shared everything from clothes to secrets, and even though we occasionally fought like any siblings, we were incredibly supportive of each other. Our parents have always emphasized family unity, so I've always prioritized attending family events and celebrations, no matter how busy my life got. However, recently, something happened that has put me in a situation where I'm questioning if I'm being unreasonable. Emma got engaged about a year ago to a man named Jared, 30M. From the start, I had a few concerns, though I tried to keep them to myself. Jared comes from a wealthy family and works in finance. He's charming in public, but I noticed that he often made condescending remarks towards service staff, waiters, and even his own family gatherings. At first, I brushed it off as him being awkward or overly formal, but over time, it became more apparent that he has a very controlling personality. He tends to make jokes at the expense of others, often belittling people without any self-awareness. Things started escalating a few months ago when Emma invited me over to help her with wedding planning. I noticed that Jared would constantly undermine her choices, whether it was about the guest list, decorations, or even what food would be served. For example, she wanted a small, intimate wedding, but Jared insisted on inviting over 200 people, claiming that it would be embarrassing if they didn't. I tried to offer gentle suggestions to Emma about standing her ground, but she always brushed it off, saying she wanted to avoid conflict. Then came the incident that really made me question everything. About 2 months ago, we were at a family brunch to discuss wedding logistics, and Jared started criticizing my appearance in front of everyone, making comments about my outfit being too casual and joking about how I always seem a little messy. I felt humiliated and confronted him privately afterward, asking him to stop making personal comments. He laughed it off and said I was too sensitive and that I should learn to take a joke. I mentioned it to Emma, expecting her to back me up, but she said, "He didn't mean it that way. You're overreacting." I was shocked. Things continued to deteriorate. Jared started making passive-aggressive comments about my work, my living situation, and even my friends. He would make jokes about how people like me can't understand his lifestyle, implying that I wasn't sophisticated enough for Emma's circle. I began to feel like he was deliberately trying to isolate Emma from the people who care about her. I voiced my concerns to my parents, who also seemed uneasy, but they said, "Emma's happy. That's what matters." About a month ago, I attended a bridal shower that Emma and Jared hosted. It was clear that Jared controlled every aspect of the event. When one of Emma's friends suggested a game, he shot it down, saying it wasn't classy enough. When I tried to help Emma talk to her guests and make sure everyone was comfortable, he rolled his eyes and said I was interfering. The final straw was when he made a sarcastic remark about my career, implying that I was never going to make it in my field. I left the shower early, feeling humiliated and frustrated. After that, I decided I needed to have a serious conversation with Emma. I told her that I couldn't attend the wedding as long as Jared was involved in that controlling, demeaning way. I explained that I couldn't support a union where I felt that someone I cared about was being manipulated and belittled. Emma was devastated. She cried, accused me of being selfish, and said I was attacking the man she loves. I tried to clarify that I wasn't attacking him personally, but was concerned about his behavior and how it affected her. She said, "I don't need you to police my fiancé. If you can't be happy for me, maybe you shouldn't be part of my life." I offered to attend if Jared agreed to certain boundaries, like avoiding personal comments or condescension, but Emma refused to even discuss it with him. She said, "He's my partner, and I trust him. You need to respect that." I told her that respecting her partner doesn't mean I have to endure verbal attacks and passive-aggressive behavior. After that conversation, she stopped responding to my messages for weeks. Our parents are upset with me, saying that family is about showing up for milestones, even if you have issues with someone. My friends are divided. Some say I should just grin and bear it for the sake of my sister, while others say I'm justified in protecting my own mental health. I feel torn because I love my sister and don't want to lose her, but I also don't want to compromise my dignity or be in a toxic environment. I haven't told Emma directly that I'm officially skipping the wedding yet, but I've made it clear that I cannot attend unless things change. My parents keep pressuring me, saying that I'm being dramatic and that I should forgive and forget. I've tried, but every interaction with Jared has made me feel disrespected and anxious. So, Reddit, AITA for considering not attending my sister's wedding because of her fiancé's behavior. I feel like if I go, I'm enabling his behavior, but I also feel like I could be seen as abandoning my sister at one of the most important moments in her life. I've tried reasoning and setting boundaries, but Emma refuses to acknowledge my concerns. I want to do the right thing, but I'm unsure what that even is. I know weddings are complicated and emotions run high, but I don't want to compromise my principles or put myself in a situation where I feel demeaned. AITA for refusing to host my sister's wedding at my house after she demanded I make it perfect without contributing financially or helping with the planning. I, 32F, live in a modest 3-bedroom house that I've been slowly renovating over the past few years. I enjoy having friends and family over occasionally, but it's not a huge space, and I've never hosted an event larger than a birthday party. My sister, Jenna, 29F, recently got engaged to her fiancé, Mark, 31M, and almost immediately started talking about having her wedding at my house. She's always been a bit dramatic, but this felt extreme, especially considering she lives in a much larger apartment herself and has enough savings to rent a venue if she wanted to. When she first brought it up, I laughed nervously, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. She told me she wanted a cozy, intimate wedding with around 70 guests. She also said she didn't want to rent any tables, chairs, or decorations and expected me to handle it all because I apparently have a good eye for design. I pointed out that my house can barely fit my immediate family comfortably, let alone 70 people, and that I would need at least a few weeks to rearrange furniture, rent items, and prep the backyard for the reception. She waved this off and said, "You'll make it work. You always do." I tried to explain that hosting a wedding is a huge responsibility and not something I could do alone or cheaply. She said I could budget wisely and implied that I could probably use some of my savings for the event. At that point, I asked her point blank if she was planning to contribute money or do any of the work herself. She said no, because it's your house, so it's your problem. Just make it magical. I started feeling uncomfortable and tried to set boundaries. I told her that I wasn't willing to host her wedding unless she contributed financially and helped with planning. She reacted as if I had slapped her across the face. She accused me of being selfish, unsupportive, and not really her sister if I couldn't give her this one thing. I reminded her that she could rent a small venue, which would be easier and safer for everyone, but she insisted that my house was the only place with the right vibe. Over the next month, the tension escalated. She invited some of her friends and family over for a quick walkthrough of my house to see the wedding setup. I had to explain that the house wasn't prepared, and she got upset, saying I was killing the excitement and sabotaging her dream wedding. She began sending me endless Pinterest boards, spreadsheets, and emails detailing table arrangements, floral designs, and catering options she expected me to organize. Every time I tried to discuss limits or budget, she accused me of being difficult or unkind. My fiancé, Tom, 34M, has been extremely supportive. He agrees that hosting 70 people in our small home is unrealistic and points out that the financial and emotional burden isn't fair. We even offered to host a small, private rehearsal dinner or post-wedding brunch to help celebrate, but she dismissed these ideas as not enough. A couple of weeks ago, she told me she had made a final decision. She would only have her wedding at my house, and if I refused, she would have a private elopement and still hold a reception at your expense in a passive-aggressive way. I felt completely blindsided. This seemed manipulative and, frankly, a bit threatening. I told her firmly that I would not host her wedding at my house under those conditions, that the decision was final, and that if she chose to do an elopement, that was her choice, but it would not involve my home or my money. She responded by sending a long message calling me heartless, controlling, and ungrateful, claiming that I had never supported her in any meaningful way. She also blocked me on social media temporarily, only to unblock me with more accusations a few days later. Our parents have been involved, to some extent, mostly trying to mediate. My mom sided with Jenna at first, saying I should help my sister on her big day, but after I explained the logistical and financial issues, she acknowledged my concerns were reasonable. My dad has stayed out of it mostly, but hinted that Jenna might be overreacting. Some of our extended family has reached out to me privately, and the consensus seems to be that I am not obligated to host a wedding in my home. Still, a few relatives have told me I'm letting her down and breaking family bonds. I feel caught in the middle of wanting to support my sister, but also maintaining my boundaries and protecting my home and finances. Hosting a wedding for 70 people in a house that barely fits 6 comfortably seems absurd to me, and expecting me to organize and pay for it alone feels unfair. At the same time, seeing her reaction and knowing she's genuinely disappointed makes me feel guilty. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to host my sister's wedding at my house under the conditions she demanded. AITA for refusing to forgive my sister after she sabotaged my wedding plans. 28F, have always been close with my younger sister, Emma, 25F. Growing up, we had a pretty normal sibling relationship. Occasional fights over trivial things, but nothing serious. I moved out at 18 for college, and Emma stayed with our parents for a few more years before joining me in the city I live in now. Life was good, and we stayed in touch constantly. About a year ago, I got engaged to my fiancé, Jake, 30M. He's amazing, responsible, and supportive, and I was genuinely excited to start planning our wedding. I had a vision for a small, intimate ceremony with about 50 guests, mainly family and close friends. I wanted it to be simple but meaningful. Emma, however, had different ideas. She's always had a flair for drama and loves being the center of attention. When I first mentioned the wedding plans, she jokingly said she wanted to help make it unforgettable. I laughed, assuming she meant she would assist with minor tasks or decorations. I didn't think anything could go wrong with her involved. The problem started when I asked Emma to help coordinate the seating arrangements and send out the invitations. I thought it would be nice for her to feel involved. I also gave her access to our shared Pinterest board and planning documents. At first, everything seemed fine, but then I noticed a few odd things. Some friends of mine who were on the guest list told me they hadn't received invitations, even though Emma insisted she had sent them. A few days later, I found out that Emma had RSVP'd no for some of my closest friends and family without asking me. I confronted her, and she said she didn't think those people fit the vibe I was going for. I was shocked and upset, but I tried to let it go, assuming maybe she had misunderstood. As wedding day approached, things escalated. I had picked a local florist, and Emma insisted on bringing in her friend who owned a small boutique floral company. She told me she had better taste, and that my choices were too boring. I reluctantly agreed to meet with her friend. When I got there, I discovered she had secretly replaced the flowers I had ordered with entirely different arrangements. She claimed she thought I would thank her later, but I was furious. These flowers were a major part of my vision, and I felt completely disrespected. The tipping point came the night before the wedding. Jake and I were finalizing decorations at the venue when I found Emma in the kitchen, hiding all of my personal wedding items, including my garter, my veil, and even my speech notes. She said she wanted to add some surprises to make the day memorable, but it caused a huge panic. I was left scrambling to find replacements at the last minute. I was so stressed that I cried in front of Jake, and he was understandably upset. On the day of the wedding, things didn't improve. Emma had made a seating chart that completely ignored my instructions, placing my relatives far from each other and seating her friends in prime spots. She also had changed the music playlist without consulting me, replacing my carefully chosen songs with her own random selections. Several of my guests later told me that Emma was making a scene, drawing attention to herself, and even gossiping about who looked good and bad in their outfits. After the wedding, I confronted Emma directly. I told her that her behavior was completely unacceptable and that I felt betrayed. She laughed it off and said I was overreacting, that she only wanted to make the wedding fun and exciting. I told her that her idea of fun was not appropriate and that she had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. Emma got defensive, saying I was ungrateful and that she had only wanted to help, but I pointed out that her version of help was destructive and hurtful. Since then, I've refused to speak to her. I've blocked her on social media and only communicate with her parents when necessary. Some of my friends think I'm overreacting and say I should forgive her because she's family. Others say that what she did was manipulative and that my anger is justified. My parents are upset with me for not talking to her, claiming that families should always stick together, but I feel like what she did was beyond a typical sibling disagreement. I've tried to reflect and see if I overreacted, but I honestly feel like this was intentional sabotage. I never asked her to take full control of any aspect of the wedding, and she repeatedly ignored my instructions. I feel hurt, betrayed, and embarrassed, and I can't imagine trusting her with anything in the future. So, AITA for refusing to forgive my sister after she sabotaged my wedding? Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos also. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.